In the last section, we looked at a diagram to understand our chunk solution. Let's now continue by coding this thing up. So inside my code editor, I'm going to make sure I'm inside of my chunk index.js file. I will open up my function here and we'll start adding a little bit of code. So remember, step one is to declare a new array that is going to hold all these different chunks. So I'm going to create a new array. I'm going to call it chunked to say, hey, this is the array that holds all the different chunks of data. Next, we will iterate through our original array of elements right here. To iterate through the array, we're going to use the for of helper again. So we'll say for let element of array, and then we'll execute some logic inside of here to look at the last element inside of our chunked array. So to get the last element inside the chunked array, we'll make a temporary variable. So we'll say last to say this is the last element inside that array. And then to get the last element inside of there, we can say chunked at chunked.length -1, like so. Now the next part is pretty well explained by the diagram over here. We want to check both to see if that last element does not exist or if its length is equal to the chunk size. Because if it is, we want to push a new chunk into chunked with the current element that we are iterating over. So to accomplish that, we can say if last does not exist, or if the length of last is equal to our chunk size, so remember chunk size up here is an argument, then we want to add a new element to chunked or a new chunk to chunked and put our element inside that. So to do that, we can say chunked.push, and then rather than put a new chunk inside of it and then add the element in, we can do both things at the same time. So we'll push in a new chunk and we'll immediately put our element that we are currently iterating over inside there. So we're doing both things in one step. Now the last thing we have to take care of is the case in which we already have a chunk, but it is not yet full. So in that case, we're going to take the current element and add it to the chunk. And remember, the chunk that we're discussing is this last variable right here. So otherwise, we will last.push, because remember, last right here is going to be the chunk that we are currently working with, and we will put our element into that thing. Now the very last step, and make sure you never forget this, this is such an easy thing to forget, make sure that you return the chunked array at the very bottom. So we will make sure that we return chunked, like so. Okay, so I'll save this. Let's check our tests and see how we're doing. Well, hey, looks good to me. We've got 5 tests passing out of 5. So like I said, this is one possible solution. I think that this might be the slightly more obvious one, or whenever I say obvious, I don't mean, hey, this is so obvious, you should definitely get this. I just mean to say this one is probably a little bit more evident than the alternative solution that we'll look at in the next section. I do consider the next solution to be a little bit easier to put together and probably easier to understand, but it's definitely more challenging to kind of think of on your own. It's one where you kind of have to sit down and kind of noodle on it for a little bit. This kind of iterative solution right here is probably one of the first ways a lot of people will think about accomplishing this. Now, maybe if you thought of a solution like this and you didn't take this entire, hey, let's look at the last chunk and see what to do with it, well, maybe you didn't take that approach, but maybe you at least did this kind of let's iterate through the array and consider each element. That's what I mean by, I think this one might be a little bit more common to see in the wild. So this is one possible solution. Let's continue in the next section and we're going to look at the second possible solution to this problem. So quick break and I'll see you in just a minute.